Hey guys, I'm your host, Tara A. Devlin, and welcome to this week's episode of Kowabana, true Japanese scary stories from around the internet. My latest book, Kowabana Volume 12, is now out. Collecting even more of your favourite stories from the show, you can find creepy ghosts, abandoned buildings, haunted shrines, fascinating monsters, and much, much more. You can find that on Amazon right now, and help support the show at the same time. This week, we're looking at stories of things that perhaps should have been left untouched and unknown. First up, a young woman finds her grandmother's diary after she passes and discovers a shocking secret. Was she really who she thought she was all along? Find out in Grandma's Diary. I was extremely fond of my grandmother, and even when I was in junior high, I still went to visit her a lot. She was my grandmother on my father's side, and he passed away in a tragic accident when I was just a baby. My grandfather also passed away long ago, so my grandmother always doted on me and said I was her only remaining blood relative left. My mother and her didn't get on very well though, so I always visited her alone. Every Sunday morning, it was our thing to visit a shrine together. My grandmother was a very religious person, and rain, hail, or shine, she never missed her trip to the shrine after my father passed away. I loved going with her because her hand was always so warm as she held mine. She always put her hands together in prayer, bowed deeply, and stayed there for a long time praying. My prayers were simple, so I watched her serious expression from the side. I always asked her what she was praying for, but she'd just smile and stay silent. This didn't bother me though. I always looked forward to the ice cream she bought me after that, and we chatted together on our way home. Now, to change the subject, ever since I was young, I always had a strong ability to see ghosts, and I was often troubled by the supernatural. I suffered from sleep paralysis daily, and I was always exhausted. As the years went on, this got worse, escalating to something touching my legs as I slept, and feeling like something was stabbing me with pins in the stomach. I visited a spirit medium with my mother several times, but they were expensive, and nothing seemed to work, so we gave up. By the time I was in the 3rd grade of junior high, these disturbances were even worse. I was involved in several traffic accidents, and every night I was bothered by sleep paralysis and strange supernatural phenomena, like hair and bugs on top of my food. It was wearing me down, and I stopped going to school. My grandmother came over while my mother was at work and always held my hand. My time with her was the only time I felt at peace. My mother always came home late, so we didn't have much time to talk. Every single day I was throwing up, and my health, both physical and mental, took such a bad downturn that I honestly tried to end things once and for all. Living was just so hard, but at the same time, I couldn't die either. In time, I wasn't able to visit the shrine with my grandmother anymore either. Shortly after I graduated from junior high, my grandmother, my only support in the world, also passed away. I couldn't stop crying. I locked myself in her room and cried for days while hugging her clothes. Even then, my mother still went to work with not a single sign of sadness on her face. Because of her, I was able to eat, but honestly, I was still angry at her. About 2 weeks after my grandmother passed, I realized that I was no longer suffering from spiritual disturbances. I only had 4 friends, and one of them said on the phone, "Your grandmother must have taken all your pain to heaven with her." I couldn't stop crying again. A year later, I was no longer suffering from any of these disturbances at all. Both my mental and physical health returned, and I started doing distance education. I was enjoying life again with the support of my friends from my part-time job. Around this time, I went to my grandmother's house to sort out her things because they were going to tear it down. Things had calmed down by then, so I visited her grave daily. As I was sorting through her wardrobe, I found several of her old diaries wrapped up in cloth. The entries were written every Sunday, but as I looked through them, I was shocked. The first page was written the day my father died. I was told it was an accident, but the diary said he took his own life. He did so because my mother cheated on him. I was so shocked that I burst into tears. But when I turned to the next page, I went cold all over. There, my grandmother spoke of her hatred towards me. It was all over the page, from the top to the bottom. She started by saying that I was the product of my mother's cheating, and that she wanted to kill me, and that I should die, and so on. This was not the grandmother that I knew. Every time she visited the shrine, she was praying for me to die a painful death. All that time, week after week, as she stood there forever praying, all she wanted was the death of the little girl that was standing next to her. And her fervent prayers were answered because I suffered massively. And then she also died in pain. I burnt the diary. Even now, many years later, I still can't forget what happened. But I've never told a single soul about it. Next, a nurse on her way to work finds herself, well, not where she expected to be. What's really going on? Find out in Empty World. This happened to me about 2 years ago when I was working as a nurse. I'm a temp office worker now, and when I think back on how I worked those horrendous shifts, I'm amazed at how I survived. I mean, this was a world where 17 and 18-hour days were common. On this particular day, I was doing a double shift on day duty. I went through the normal entrance around 7:30 a.m., but the hospital was eerily deserted. I couldn't see nor sense anyone at all. Normally, there would be people everywhere, being breakfast time and all. I made my way towards the changing rooms, but my colleagues from the same shift weren't even there either. I tried contacting them by phone, but I got a message saying that their phones weren't turned on, or they were out of range or something. At any rate, I decided to head to the nurses' station to take over from the previous shift. But even on the way there, I didn't see any other workers or patients. I'd never seen anything this strange before, so I was honestly afraid. I decided to look around for someone, anyone, but I was scared to walk around by myself, so I grabbed the receiver for the internal line instead. Yet, I couldn't even hear the dial tone the phone made before an outgoing call. I was beginning to panic, and once again, I reached for my own phone. I accidentally dropped it, and as I fumbled to pick it up, I looked at the home screen and saw the number for my parents' house. I called it right away. When I heard the usual dial tone, I burst into tears. There was a sound of the phone being picked up, and suddenly I fell to the floor in a heap. "Hello? Mum? It's me! Where on earth are you? I got a call from your colleague at the hospital. You were supposed to start work earlier, but you never showed up. Did you have an accident or something?" It was like all the energy drained from my body. I sat limp on the floor. Then I realized something even more horrifying. When I dropped my phone just before, the battery had fallen out. There was no battery in my phone, so how on earth was I talking to my mother? I threw my phone and ran away aimlessly. I don't remember how I got there, but once I was near the service entrance, I was so exhausted that I could barely take another step, and I stopped to bend over and catch my breath. I was almost out, so even now, I have no idea why I stopped to rest there. Suddenly, I looked up. There was a mirror on the wall in front of me. When I looked at it closely, I realized that I had no reflection. I couldn't see myself in the mirror. And at that moment, I passed out. When I came back to, I was lying on the sofa in the nurse's station. The usual hustle and bustle of the hospital was carrying on around me. The colleague I first tried to contact told me that they found me passed out near the service entrance. But strangely, she said that someone had told them I was passed out there, but nobody could remember who it was. She spoke directly to that person, but now she couldn't remember what they looked like, how tall they were, or even if they were a man or a woman. That colleague questioned me about what happened, but I was unable to provide any evidence for what I saw. But my phone that I threw away and all of my personal belongings that I left in the changing room were gone. And come to think of it, there was never a mirror on that wall in the hospital to begin with. What would you do if you saw the same person seemingly everywhere you went, never getting closer, but never getting further away either? The narrator of this next story faces that exact dilemma, but how will they get out of it? Find out in The White Umbrella. It was late and raining, so after we were done hanging out, I took my friend home and then stopped by a convenience store so I could read this week's comics. I was the only person there. I picked up my first magazine and then looked up and saw a person in white clothes holding a white umbrella walk past the store. What are they doing out walking at this time of night? I thought, even though I was doing the same thing, and then turned my eyes back to the magazine. When I was done reading, I put the magazine back and then picked up the next one. When I looked back up, that same person from earlier walked past again. There was a parking lot between the store and the footpath, so I couldn't see their face up close, but the way they looked and walked was exactly the same, so I knew it was the same person. I thought it was a little odd, but the world is full of interesting people, so I didn't think much more of it. I finished the second magazine, then I picked the one up that had come out just that day, that the clerk had put out just earlier. I rolled my shoulders a few times, feeling stiff, and then I saw that same person walking again. That person with the white umbrella. By this point, it was getting kind of creepy, so I did my best to focus just on the comic before me and not look outside again. After I was done reading another 2 magazines, I chatted with the clerk for a bit, bought some food, then went outside. The rain had let up a little, but I didn't want it to start pouring again, so I rushed over to the footpath to get home before it did, and stopped in shock. 20 meters ahead of me was that person with the white umbrella. It was the countryside, meaning few cars were out at that hour, and there weren't many streetlights either, so once I stepped away from the convenience store, it was dark, and that made it even creepier. Something about it didn't feel right. I started walking slower on purpose, and yet I was still catching up to them. I couldn't help but wonder just how slow they were walking. When I was about 3 meters behind this person with the white umbrella, I really didn't want to get any closer, and I certainly didn't want to overtake them either. So, although it was a little early, I decided to take the next corner into an alley, but then the person ahead of me turned there first. Oh, thank God, I thought, feeling bad for all the strange things I had imagined about them. I even bowed a little to their back in apology. But then the person said something. Eh? I thought, but because they weren't facing me, I figured they were just talking to themselves. I kept walking, and as I was about to pass the alley, I looked to the right. I saw a familiar residential area. I also saw the person with the white umbrella. While I can't exactly say it sent chills down my spine, it still didn't feel quite right. I mean, I was walking slowly and still catching up to them, so they must have been walking even slower than that. But now I was walking quite fast, taking even bigger steps than usual, you might say. And that person was walking parallel to me 1 street away. A bad feeling washed over me, and to try to get rid of it, I tried convincing myself that it was just a coincidence, or maybe they were a weirdo doing it on purpose. But no matter how many times I crossed that alley, the person with the wide umbrella was still walking 1 street away. I walked faster and slower during the spaces where they couldn't see me, but every time I passed them, they were right there, walking parallel to me. I was terrified and ran sideways to the main road. In my head, I told myself that it was starting to rain heavier, so I was just running because I didn't want to get wet. That was all. There were a few cars on the main road once I reached it, which made me feel a little better. I looked to my right as I crossed the main road, but I couldn't see anyone. Plus, there was no pedestrian crossing to cross over to the main road from that alley anyway. Still, maybe. As I crossed the first alley after crossing the main road, I summoned all my courage to look to the right. Nobody was there, and I didn't see anyone when I crossed the alley after that either. Of course not, I thought. Calming down, I started walking again, and at the next alley, I'd be home. I turned right where I always did. A person with a wide umbrella emerged from the alley beyond. Huh? I thought, and that person with the wide umbrella started walking towards me. I got goosebumps. By the time I realized what a dangerous position I was in, I was already running back to the road I came from. I ran as fast as I could to avoid being seen, and then I turned the first corner I saw. But even so, the person with the wide umbrella walked out from the alley beyond. They came out in the middle of the road, and then turned straight towards me and started walking. In the middle of a dark, quiet, residential street, with streetlights close to the intersections, I could clearly see the person in white with the wide umbrella. Despite the fact it was so late, I screamed. I screamed as loud as my lungs possibly could. I threw the umbrella and convenience store bag I was holding and took off at once. I called my friend while I was running, waking them up. "I'm coming to your place right now, so please let me in," I begged. My friend agreed, even though I'd just dropped them off a few short hours earlier, so I ran over as quickly as I could. I crossed the main road, ran past the convenience store, and as I passed an alley and was about to turn, again I saw that person with the wide umbrella standing there. "Oh, come on! What the hell do they want?" was all I could think. I gave up turning that corner and ran for the next one. But again, that person was still standing down the other end of the street. Just as I was about to give up and go down the road anyway, my phone rang. But strangely, it wasn't an incoming call, but rather a display for a missed call. Or rather, 3 missed calls. I checked the time, and it was already after 4 a.m. In my mind, only 10 or so minutes had passed, but in reality, it was close to an hour that I'd been running around the city, and before that, I hadn't even left this area because I was unable to turn away. I grew afraid. It was like I knew nothing of the city I lived in anymore. I called my friend again. "Are you still coming? Where are you?" they said, their voice sleepy. "I want to, but I can't. Every time I turn the corner, there's this person with a wide umbrella already standing there," I said. I don't know whether I explained it very well, but then my friend said, "I don't understand what you're saying, but if they're always ahead of you, why don't you let them follow you?" I had no idea what to say to that. Huh? What the hell are you saying?" You're not making any sense, I screamed back. I was so confused that I was getting angry, but my friend remained calm and replied, "So, you turn one time in the direction opposite the one you want to go, okay? Then they're ahead of you, yeah? So then, if you turn around and go straight, it will be like they're following you instead, and you can go in the direction you want, yes?" At that point, I honestly didn't care anymore. "Yeah, all right," I said, and then I did as my friend told me. I couldn't think anymore. That person with the white umbrella really did appear every time I turned, but when I turned and ran, they didn't follow me. Or rather, they did walk towards me, but when they reached the corner I turned, they went back. Then, when I turned another corner and went to enter the alley, they appeared ahead of me. I can go this time, I thought. But then that very same moment, I heard a voice coming from behind me. There was nobody else around. I sensed it was that thing talking, and I ran as fast as I could. As I got close to my friend's house, I called them again, and they said they'd wait out the front for me. And when I got there, they really were waiting. "You're dripping wet. What happened to your umbrella?" they said with a laugh. I was somewhat relieved. I explained what I saw and asked them to check the road I just came from with me. It was dark and far away, but we clearly saw a person in white clothes with a white umbrella standing at the intersection ahead of us. My friend, surprised, rushed back into the house with me, and we could hear a low voice coming from somewhere far away. My friend's cat kept pacing between the window and the door as well. By the time we started hearing cars and it got brighter outside, that sound had finally disappeared. Later that same day, my friend and I visited a shrine that was famous for exorcisms and had them perform a cleansing ceremony for us. "You're better off forgetting what happened," the priest said. "There are many who don't understand, and I don't either." Be careful with what you find in the mountains. All might not be as it appears. Find out why in The Mannequin's Warning. Quite some time ago, there was a post about some damaged mannequins that someone found deep in the mountains that were arranged like a family. This is a story similar to that. I live in the countryside, and when it's the season, we generally climb the mountain behind our house to pick some mushrooms. When I was in elementary school, I often went with my grandfather and he showed me the best places to look. But when I started junior high, I started going either by myself or with a friend instead. This particular day was a Sunday, so I went with one of my friends. The search was going well, and when it was around time to go home, my friend suddenly screamed and then fell to the ground. It wasn't uncommon for a random tree branch to cut us on the legs, so I thought that was it. But then my friend looked up. I followed his gaze and there was a body hanging from the tree. No, 2 bodies. I was honestly so shocked that no voice came out. Panicking, I was unable to do anything other than stare at them for a while. But then I realized I wasn't staring at actual dead bodies. They were mannequins. This is someone's idea of a joke? What the hell? I spat out. And then I started back down the mountain with my friend. When I got back home, I told my father what we saw, and then the 3 of us went back up with a small ladder, hatchet, and some shears to remove the mannequins. My dad climbed the ladder while my friend and I held it on each side. He swiftly cut the rope around the mannequins' necks, and they tumbled to the ground. We wanted to get rid of them quickly, so the 3 of us carried them back to our shed at home. We decided to break the mannequins up for ease of disposal, and Also, so they didn't look quite so human anymore. The first step was getting rid of the clothes they were wearing, but when we started removing them, we noticed something written in large red letters on one of the mannequin's stomachs. "The person who cuts down this mannequin will die." We all froze when we saw it. My father then took the dress off the other mannequin, and there was a message written on the stomach of that one too. "The person who cuts down this mannequin will have someone they love die." "Go get us a drink," my father said to my friend and I as we stood there frozen. Then he immediately started smashing the mannequins to throw away. It's been a taboo topic ever since that day to talk about what we saw. I don't like to actually say it out loud, but the message saying, "Someone you love will die," was the most painful. Finally this week, 2 old friends visit a famous local ghost spot when one returns home for the holidays. It's a decision both will soon regret. Find out why in Human Flesh Hall. Hey, you want to visit the Human Flesh Hall? It was the summer holidays, and I decided to head back home to Nagano for the first time in a while. I worked in Tokyo, but my parents lived in a small town in the mountains of Nagano. Temperatures were high, but it wasn't so hot and humid. The Alps ran along either side, creating a spectacular view. The atmosphere was extremely comfortable, entirely unlike the big city, and I was happy to finally be heading back home. But it seemed nobody was there. Both my parents were self-employed, and thus at work. My siblings were also hanging out somewhere else. I sat in the lounge to take a break. I was exhausted from work, and I left the house early that morning, so I decided to take a nap until my family got back. The sound of my phone ringing woke me up. Seemed it was from an old friend who knew I was coming back for a visit. He was inviting me out for a meal. I hadn't been home for quite some time, and I was hoping to have dinner with my family, but I was also excited to see my friend, so I accepted right away. I hung up and looked at the clock. It was already after 6 p.m. I'd slept for quite some time. The sunset was turning the room orange, and it was so bright I could barely see. And still, nobody was home. I sent my mother a message telling her I was going out for dinner. Then I washed my face, got ready, and got in the car to drive over to my friend's house. I rang the doorbell once I arrived, and a familiar face looked back out at me. We chatted for a bit, and then we decided to head out. We got to talking about the good old days, how things were going now, etc. after our meal, and then, when we were getting ready to leave the restaurant, my friend suddenly looked excited. "Hey, you want to visit the Human Flesh Hall?" The Human Flesh Hall was a famous local ghost spot. It was an abandoned building a little up the mountain from the hot spring area just outside of town. According to the rumors, it used to be a barbecue joint, but when the owner started facing financial difficulties, they took to killing people and selling their flesh instead. Hence the name. While the story was well known, I didn't know anyone who'd actually been there. At first, I didn't really want to go, but my friend was insistent, and I wasn't really that opposed to stuff like this in the first place, so finally, I gave in. By this point, it was around 9 p.m. We'd looked up the location online and then set out right away. It was roughly a 30-minute drive away. We reached the foot of the mountain where the Human Flesh Hall was located. For some reason, there was a shrine gate, and then a road that extended beyond it. Even with the high beams on, the mountain was so dark that we could barely see past the shrine gate. According to the map, the Human Flesh Hall was a little further up the road. Luckily, we could get there by car, so we wouldn't have to get out and walk. Cautiously, I pushed forward, scared because I was unable to see anything ahead of us. That, and knowing where we were going, naturally made me drive slower. The road was narrow, and the only way to turn back was by doing a U-turn in a small space further up ahead. And with this visibility, it would be impossible to reverse, so you'd have to wait until the light of morning. As I climbed the winding mountain road, the thick trees to our left cleared, and suddenly a building appeared. I pulled over next to it, and then my friend in the passenger's seat got out and shone a light on it. It was a pretty big building. One wall was white with moss attached to it here and there. There was also a rusty metal hook, probably where the restaurant sign had once hung. Before us was an open space like a lobby, and there was glass all over the ground. This was no doubt made entirely of glass once, so you could see in from the outside. Beyond that were some broken tables and chairs scattered around the place. This was no doubt the human flesh hall. I turned the car off. Everything fell silent. So silent you couldn't even hear the cries of any insects. I was too afraid to turn the car lights off. It was just the two of us, alone in a dark forest. Unspeakable fear filled me. I finally turned the headlights off. The only thing we had to rely on now was our torches. I looked at my watch to check the time. It was 10 p.m. There was a door to enter the building, but with the glass broken, you could enter from pretty much anywhere. Still, the trees were growing rather thickly around it, so it was hard to pass down the sides to get in. My friend took the lead. There was rubbish all over the floor and things written all over the walls, no doubt from previous visitors. Still, it was pretty scary. When you have no light but that of your torch, when you move it around to the next place, you can't help but wonder if, this time, it'll illuminate something. We went in through the entrance and then entered the kitchen. The prep tables were covered in rust and spiderwebs hung from the ceiling. There were no knives or cooking utensils anywhere, but just like the entrance, the kitchen was full of rubbish like empty noodle cups and such. My friend, standing in the rear, shone his torch on me, then gestured for me to follow him. It seemed he'd found a way through. There was a door connected by a single hinge that looked like it could fall off at any moment, and, beyond it, extended a hall. About 5 meters in was another door blocking the way, this one much sturdier. It was also locked with a padlock. I looked at my watch. It was almost 11 p.m. It was late at night and there was a padlock ahead of us. I was already thinking about ending the night right there. Yet for some reason, my friend was trying to open the padlock with a piece of iron he'd picked up somewhere. Just as I was about to tell him to stop, there was a loud cracking sound and the metal split. Unconsciously, I looked around. I couldn't help but wonder if someone else might have heard the sound. My friend looked smug, however, and then gestured for me to follow again. I sighed and did as he asked. Beyond the door was yet another hallway, this one leading to a staircase going up at the end. There was no rubbish here, likely because it had been locked. I was a little confused because I didn't expect the rear of the restaurant to be so spacious, but we continued forward, even though it was already so late. I suggested that we should split up from here. Perhaps aware of the time, he agreed. After we both had a look around, we'd return to that same spot. I would look around on the second floor while my friend checked around the back. I looked up the stairs. They turned right about 5 steps up, so I had no idea what was beyond. Was somebody standing up there? I hesitated. Bang! A loud noise almost made me scream. It seemed my friend had gone on ahead. Making up my mind, I started walking too. Fortunately, nobody was waiting for me around the bend of the stairs. There was another door, however, which I opened. Using my torch, I looked around. There were a few desks, as well as white and blackboards on the walls. It appeared to be an office, and the wall in the back was again entirely made of glass. I approached it and looked down. I could see the first floor. It was spacious with a glass ceiling, and thanks to the moonlight, I could see in well. It really was huge, almost like a school gym, but the only things that really stood out were a few large machines and some mountains of grass that looked like hay. There was also a circular space in the middle, and various fenced enclosures. Looking closely, there appeared to be a large square box in the center, but I couldn't see any more than that. Thinking it over, I realized what that room probably was. The meat processing area. The pigs and cows were raised in the enclosed areas and then processed in the middle. They were then used as food. And if the rumors were true, then so were people. That thought made the place before me even creepier. As I looked down, suddenly I saw a flickering light. It was my friend walking around downstairs. He was walking near a large machine, and after looking at it for a moment, he disappeared into some shadows, and also from view. I took a quick look around the room I was in, and then went back downstairs to wait for my friend. Quite a bit of time passed, and yet he still hadn't come back. That room might have been big, sure, but it was about time for him to return now. Did something happen to him? I held my torch up again and went through the same door my friend did. I had just looked at it, so I was somewhat aware of the layout of the room, but after actually entering it, I realized just how big it really was. The passage from the door led further into the back, and at the end of that should be the circular space I saw from above. And that large machine almost seemed to block the passage partway in. If I yelled, then I should find my friend right away, but at the same time, it was so quiet that I couldn't find my voice. I had no choice but to carefully keep moving. Maybe my friend would jump out of the shadows to try to scare me. With every step I took, the hay beneath my feet crunched. I'd walked a short distance from the entrance when I saw that circular space I first saw from above, just as I thought I would. And then, the square thing I couldn't quite tell from the second floor gradually came into view. It didn't take too long to realize what it was. A large fridge. It was a large commercial one, not a household fridge, and it was placed right there in the middle of the space. It was so unnatural. There was no fear worse than being in a place like this and seeing something so unnatural. I approached the fridge. It was also covered in rust and didn't seem to be working. I grabbed the handle and pulled. It rattled, but that was all. Was it rusted shut? I pushed and pulled for a while, but it refused to open. I decided to look for my friend again and went back towards that large machine. But then, as I took just a few steps away from the fridge, a large roar stopped me in my tracks. I immediately knew where it was coming from. That fridge right behind me. I had assumed it was broken, and then the fan started moving. I spun around, but I was so afraid that I couldn't move from the spot. What on earth was going on? Why did the fridge suddenly start? I watched it for a while, and then suddenly the noise stopped. Then something creaked. The fridge door was opening. A heavy, dull sound echoed throughout the room. The door opened slowly, exposing what was hidden inside. Familiar eyes, a familiar nose, a familiar mouth, a familiar face. It was my friend's head. My friend I had known since junior high. We went to school together every day and hung out just as much. We went to different high schools and universities, and then he got a job with a local company while I moved to Tokyo for work. And yet, even though we lived in different prefectures, whenever I came back, we always went out for drinks. He was one of my closest friends who I could talk about anything with. And now, his head sat behind a fridge door. Blood dripped from both black eyes as they stared in different directions, and a long tongue poked out of his mouth like a snake. Maybe it had been cut off and then placed there. I almost wet myself. Then my legs were no longer able to hold me up, and I collapsed to the floor. Grief filled me, and I just stared, dumbfounded. Then, out of nowhere, I heard the sound of metal scraping on something. It was coming from behind the fridge, the one spot where the moonlight couldn't reach. I turned my torch in that direction and something slowly emerged from the light. Slowly. Ever so slowly. It was a man wearing a bloody apron and holding an incredibly long knife with both hands. There was also a woman, her clothes dyed red from blood. She was holding my friend's arm. The knife was large enough that it could no doubt behead a large animal. It was rusty and covered in blood. The man smiled and rubbed his hands together with the knife handle between them. The arm that woman was holding had my friend's watch on. She was trying desperately to rip it off. I don't even want to imagine what that meant. They didn't give me any time to grieve for my friend. The man ran straight at me, raising the knife in the air with both hands. He was going to kill me. I stood up and ran as fast as my feet would carry me. I didn't look back once, just ran all the way to the exit. Behind me, I could hear shouts and things banging. The only words I could hear amongst all the noise were, "Bon appetit." Nothing else made sense. I flew out the exit and jumped into the car. I turned the key, my hands shaking. The car quickly started and I took off. I had to find somewhere to turn around so I could go back down. I drove up the mountain. As I climbed, a fog covered the area. I could barely see anything. I had no choice but to slow down and look for any space where I could turn around, and as I drove, I came upon a sturdy steel gate that signified the end of the road. It was wrapped with several heavy chains that wouldn't budge even if I drove into it. I stopped the car. I cried as I thought of my friend. I looked out the window as I did, and then grabbed my phone. To Mum. Subject: I'm sorry. Message: Mum, I'm sorry. I'm going back to Tokyo. Something just came up. I'm sorry I couldn't eat your cooking. It's been a while. I'll come back some other time. I'm really sorry. I pressed send and then closed my phone. Then, a man stood outside my window. As he watched me close my phone, he broke the window glass. A huge thank you and shout out to this week's Cummy Tier members, Christina, Giovanni, and Estash. It's thanks to your support, along with everyone else, that I'm able to keep doing this show, so thank you very much. Don't forget to check out Kowabana Volume 12, out on Amazon right now, and check out our newly revamped merchandise store at kowabana.store. And if you'd like to chat about this week's stories, come and join us in the Kowabana Discord. You can find that link in the description or on kowabana.net. You can also check out our Patreon at patreon.com/TaraADevlin for exclusive bonus stories and extras, or our YouTube channel at youtube.com/KowabanaJapan for all sorts of Japanese horror you won't find anywhere else. Thanks guys, stay safe, and I'll see you again next time for even more Kowabana, true Japanese scary stories from around the internet. Want even more scary stories? Head over to kowabana.net for new translations every week. You can also join our Patreon for exclusive stories you won't find anywhere else. Head over to kowabana.net now.